Well, good evening, guys. Welcome back.
The camera?
Sorry we didn't have a show this weekend, but there was a lot of stuff going on, and so we just decided not to. Now, if we don't have a investigation this weekend coming up, then we will probably have a gather and gab on Saturday. But we will play it as the week goes. It's still early, so we'll see what happens. We have two topics tonight. We have one called The Devil's Tramping Ground, and the other one, People in the Attic. Now, I don't know if anybody's familiar with either one of those, but they're both going to be quite interesting. I did a lot of research on both of them. The People in the Attic one is based off of a book, and I guess they were even on a TV show. I might have to do that into a two-parter, depending on how long of a time we go into. So,
Hi, Linda. Hi, Cactus.
hello, everyone. The temperature tonight is 40 degrees. We did get up to around 48, it said today. It's 40 degrees. It says it feels like 40. Eric said it's pretty chilly out there when he took the dogs out. He said the temperature dropped a lot. We are supposed to get down to right around freezing, about 32. Tomorrow we're supposed to be in the 60s again. Thursday we're supposed to be in the high 60s. Tomorrow's going to be our only clear day, it looks like, and then we're going to be back into the rain and then back down into the 40s again. And we did have snow last night. It didn't like really stick, but we had snow flurries and everything last night. So
that's why it was so cold this morning.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like been so okay, let's start here. Consider this. Deep in the woods of North Carolina lies a perfect circle where nothing grows. No matter what's planted, local says it's not nature, it's something far darker. They believe that's where the devil walks. Every single night, walking in circles, plotting his next evil deed. Good old North Carolina, that's where that skinwalker incident took place that guy saw that jumped on the back of his truck. I'm going to move this over here just a little bit. So, okay. It's called the Devil's Tramping Ground. What it is the mysterious 40-foot diameter, barren, circular path located in Chatham County Pine Forest near Bear Creek, North Carolina. Legendary lore suggests that it's a spot where the devil paces in circles nightly to plot his evil deeds. Now, the location, they said, is near Harper's Crossroads. Conjure up a crossroad demon while you're at it. Where's Crowley at when we need him? Approximately 10 miles from Siler City, North Carolina. The legend, it says locals have believed for over a century that the devil tramps here at night. Legend also suggests it was a meeting place for Native American tribes or a burial site for a native chief, while skeptics claim it's just a natural salt lick. But perfect circle? Phenomena. It is alleged that objects left in the circle will be removed by the next morning and that animals refuse to enter, though some investigators have found no supernatural activity at all there. So, and you are allowed to go there. I guess you have to pay tickets and stuff and that, which we'll cover that. It's doing its catwalk. That now we know where it does its practice rounds. So we found his spot. The area is on private property, but often permits visitors. There's camping and paranormal investigations there, which are pretty popular, with sites in close proximity, though visitors must adhere to the rules set by the owners, often accessed via social media updates. The rules and regulations. It is private property. The land was privately owned and requires respect for the site as unauthorized damage has occurred, according to YouTube. Tickets and permits may be needed to be bought online as it is not a public park. Leave no trace. Visitors are encouraged not to litter and to keep the site clean. The site is known for having strangely persistent barrenness, although some reports suggest it is shrinking, in that while still eerie, it is occasionally used as a party spot.
Makes sense.
So, but here's the thing: if it is a Native American burial site or ground, and they're even suspecting that's disrespecting the native right there by having parties and stuff in that there. But people will be people. So, legends around the ring. These include that objects will disappear that were left there in the ring overnight. Dogs yipping and howling and not wanting to go near it. They said the dogs will not even cross into that circle. Strange events happen to those who spend the night within its boundaries. Claims that nothing grows within 40 feet of the ring for over 100 years. They claim the circle is where the devil walks in circles on certain nights, thinking of ways to bring evil back into the world. Now, there's a gentleman, he's from Greensboro, North Carolina. He's a journalist, a newspaper editor, an author, and an advisor to North Carolina governors and textile executives. And his name is John William Hardin. Well, he passed away apparently in 1985. He had this to say. He said, Chatham natives say that the devil goes there to walk in circles as he thinks up new means of causing trouble for humanity. There, sometimes during the dark of the night, the majesty of the underworld of evil silently tramps around that bare circle, thinking, plotting, and planning against good and behalf of wrong. Now, what is it? Here's where different speculations come out. The spot is perfectly round 40-foot circle of barren earth where nothing will grow. It's surrounded by a healthy forest, though. Inside is hard, packed dirt, reported to have existed for over 100 years. Now, the legend, devil comes at night to pace in the circles, plotting evil deeds. Nothing grows because the ground is cursed. Objects left at night are moved or disappear. Animals, especially dogs, refuse to enter the circle. Now, some visitors claim strange lights, unexplained sounds, a heavy, uneasy feeling, and that's it on there. Other theories are that it's high salt content in the soil that may prevent plant growth. An old Native American ceremonial site, which that would explain a perfect circle, but some of these other like salt content, why would it do a perfect circle? I don't know. A possible natural mineral lick or worn down area from animals or machinery. But again, they said none explained the perfect circle. So, dating back to the 1700s, locals noted something was wrong. Farmers tried planting crops, spreading grass seed, even covering it with fresh soil, but nothing lasted at all. So, what really walks in the circle when no one's watching? Is it just natural mystery or something ancient, something watching, waiting for nightfall? So, that's the first story, and I know it's short, but I found it quite interesting that we were just talking about the devil the other day and the footprints, and here I came across this where there's a complete circle where they think that's where he's practicing his catwalk steps.
It could be.
Now, if they find little pieces of like shiny accessory jewelry or something in that laying in that area, they may have found them.
Well, since it's his practice, he wouldn't have that on.
Well, depending on how far he went into practicing his thing. If he like really went into full-fledged, hey, I'm going to go all out practice, then that'll make sense. You know, my little statue over there, I think I'm going to put her in the room with the Indians. I'm changing the subject on you guys. I know I do that, but what in the foot was that? So, I don't know. Didn't look like it.
It wasn't boob.
I think it was part of a cookie that was in there from the other day yet. I don't know. Okay, so now the next story, like I said, I might have to do in two parts because it's a long one. Now I got my information based off of a documentary I watched, and uh, it's from the book called People in the Attic, and it's the Doretta Johnson haunting, and it is very, very, very interesting. Kiwi, I'll go with you there. Let's go to North Carolina. Let's go up to that area. Let's check out that circle and see what's going on. We'll come to our own conclusions. I wouldn't go there and party. I would go. Yeah, I agree, Cactus. Partying there would just be just. Especially, I have respect for Native Americans because we do have Native American in our background. But yeah, the Johnson haunting. Are you familiar with it, Linda? See, and it could be a UFO landing spot, like Linda said. That would explain the perfect circle. And nothing seems to grow in a lot of those areas where they say are crop circles. So, and some people said they had accounts of strange lights and sounds and everything. So, I would kind of go between something like a UFO or something on that order before I would.
How big is the circle?
40 feet. 40 feet.
Yeah, that could be.
Well, it's in diameter, so it would be, if you split it in half, it's 40 feet across. That'd be diameter. Because circumference. Yeah, that's pretty big. So, okay. So the Doretta Johnson haunting, like, I'm telling you what, the more I read about it, the more I'm there, like, say, what? So, new series. There we go. I'll write a book on it. I'll write a story, The Adventures of Diane and Kiwi. By the way, Linda gave me an idea for a story. So I might be working on a story. And if we don't have an investigation, I might have one ready for Saturday, but we'll say, like, again, we'll play it as it goes. So this is going to be a long one. So I got like 30 pages.
Escape from our hubby.
Escape from, yeah, exactly. Hallelujah to that. I know you, hallelujah. Oh, before we get started too, let's all give a big shout out to Angelina, if by chance she's listening, in her hospital bed. She had her surgery yesterday. She came through it with flying colors. She's doing well. She's going to have to take it easy for the next several weeks, but everything's looking good for her. So let's woo woo for Angelina.
Yay, Angelina.
So we send our love, Angelina, if you are listening. Okay, so the Doretta Johnson haunting. Now, she's the one that wrote the book by the accounts. Now, mind you, these are her accounts. Some could be elaborated a little bit. We'll never know, because when somebody writes a story like that, we don't know how much they're literally making up. But from what I'm reading, they seem to be pretty traumatized. Now, this took place in Madison, Indiana. Now, they were supposed to be haunted by a poltergeist in their new home. There were a family of 4. There was Doretta, her husband Ron, and their 2 children, Stephen and Ashley. Now, it says here 16 and 6. Stephen was 16, Ashley was 6. But when they bought the house, the kids were much younger, because I think at one incident that happened, Ashley was like only a year to a year and a half old. So now they lived originally in Louisville, Kentucky. And in 1986, they moved to Madison, Indiana, because Ron had a job at an electrical plant there. And the area was really, really nice for them, and for especially to raise children. So they chose that area. They loved that area. Now, and Doretta, she was having a troubled childhood herself. So it was real refreshing to know that she could be in a place where she could raise her children and not have any worries. Now, they were only renting a house on Allen Street, and they were really happy there. But since they were renting, one day back in 1987, Ron came home. He was looking at a real estate magazine. He spotted this house. So he was all excited, and he went and showed Doretta, and it was for sale near Clifton Drive. Now, when he first showed it to poor Doretta, and she looked at the house, she's like, nope. The house was real dilapidated. It was in really bad shape, but it was not only a house, it was a motel. So he liked the thought that with it having the motel attached to it, that they could open up a business because they always wanted to open up a child daycare center. And in the area that they lived, there were very, very few child daycare centers. So they thought that would fit them perfectly. So um, Ron saw the potential in the house. Doretta really didn't. But the more he talked, the more he convinced her, well, hey, maybe, okay. So they decided to go for a drive and look at the house. So the motel used to be the old Windriff Motel. And it was all run down. The property was run down. Like this place really would have needed a lot of work. But let's see, they did go down and they looked at the house, and the house was selling for only $59,900 on market. And they figured even if they fixed it up, worst case scenario, and the business failed, well, at least they invested into it and they proved that they could sell it, make a profit off of it. So it was like a win-win situation either way. So she was a little wary about it, but thought about it and agreed that maybe they could work it out. So they decided to go see it. When they first went and arrived to see the house, she was even more disappointed than when she saw the picture because it was that bad. It was, it was in bad shape. And he was talking to her and they walked around the house and he said, but this could work for us, maybe we should give it a chance. So they decided they would see it, and they weren't able to go into it because they went on their own. They didn't go there to see it with a real estate agent. They went there on their own and was just able to walk around. So as they were looking, they ran into a man named Benny Cyrus. And Benny told them that he and his family used to live there as managers of the motel until the motel closed down. Now, they lived in the house part. They weren't the owners, but they were the managers. And so they ran it. And he said he moved out to a nearby home because we couldn't handle it anymore. So Doretta automatically thought, well, the house is run down. It probably just got too much for them to manage the house and manage the motel. They just decided, we're going to move out. So she didn't really think anything of it. But they talked about it. They talked over the repair work and what they wanted. And Ron, he went ahead. He called the realtor and he talked numbers. So the realtor took them in. They looked it over, and the inside was worse than the outside. But again, good old Ron's are like, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this. And he threw a number out at the real estate agent, and they wanted $59,900 for it. He threw out the number $24,000. And he's like, okay, like that's lowballing it. He didn't think that the owner would even consider that price. But lo and behold, the realtor came back and said the owner wanted $24,500. And they're like, whoa, like, oh yeah. And Ron at one point did ask her, well, why did this house sit idle for 2 years? Why wasn't anybody buying it? And she said, because there are rumors that the floor joists in the house were really bad. And she says, but that's not true. So anyhow, they wanted $24,500. Doretta and Ron like, hey, that's half the price of what they're asking, or less than half the price of what they're asking. Hell yeah, we're going to get this baby. We're going to fix it up. This is going to be the nice family home that we want to raise our kids. And so they went for it. So they spent the rest of the summer doing repairs so they could move their family into the house. But they concentrated mainly on the house. They really wasn't too worried about the motel part of it yet because they just wanted to get the house in repair so they could move their families in. So almost immediately they were having problems. They put wallpaper up, fresh wallpaper up. As soon as they put it up, it come billowing back down. No matter how much adhesive they used, no matter how many times they tried, wallpaper would keep on coming down. Paint. They'd put paint on the wall, fresh paint. Next thing you know, the paint's peeling off or it's blistering. Paint would not stay on the wall. So that was rather odd. Electricians ran into problems there too with the rewiring. Their tools kept going missing, and when they ordered parts like fuses and switches and that to use when their electrical repairs, they would arrive all right, but they would be severely damaged or broken, or parts would be missing. Like there was always some kind of a complication with these parts when they arrived. When the cable guy came in and began to install the cable throughout the house, he got up by the attic and he handed the line to Doretta and he says, "Here, you do it yourself." And because it was the final hookup from, I don't know why there would have been a cable going up to the attic, but whatever. Maybe that's how they had to have access to run the wire down to the main part of the house or something on a connection switch or something. But she was confused and she just thought, well, maybe he was just being lazy. He just didn't want to go up in an attic. So they took care of it themselves, I guess. And she just didn't think anything was weird about that. Later on, they would have bad leaks. Lights would flicker on and off. Fresh plants would die in their garden. I mean, they were fresh and they'd immediately die. And weird stains would keep on appearing on their fireplace. And even if they painted over it, these stains would keep on coming back on the fireplace. They just would keep on reappearing. They could not explain anything whatsoever about what was happening there. So they thought that was odd. Then one night when Doretta was asleep, she heard all kinds of weird scratching, and it sounded like it was coming up from the attic. And it was like where the cable guy didn't want to go. So she woke Ron up and told him that she was hearing the scratching from up in the attic. He said he didn't hear anything. He went back to sleep, but the scratching stopped anyhow. So she said, okay, maybe just something up in the attic, a critter or something, who knows, that they just didn't know. But a few nights later, it happened again, and this time it was louder, and Ron himself heard it. So he got up and checked it out. He didn't see anything, but he crossed it off as just maybe a bird got in through the attic window, and bird was flying around up there. That's what happened. The next morning, Doretta saw a feather falling from the ceiling vent, which pretty much kind of confirmed their suspicions. So scratch that one off. They went on a trip to Louisville to visit Ron's mother one day. When they came back, they found several dead birds scattered all over the floor, and the walls of the house was splattered with blood, like as if the birds were flying into the wall in a panic situation, trying to find a way back out, but they couldn't. And one of the birds was still alive on the floor. It was still alive and still flying around in panic into the wall. So they're like, well, wait a minute. All the doors and everything in that was locked. All the windows was closed. How did these birds get in? But there had to been some way, so they dismissed that one. During the cleanup, they could not find any windows or doors open where the birds could have flown in. So, like I said, they thought it strange, but kind of brushed it off. Everything was so stained that they had to get and repaint everything. That's how much blood and that was all over from. It was like a massacre in that living room. Things were getting stressful for the Johnsons with all these problems. They started getting headaches and new allergies. It seemed to affect everyone but their littlest child, Ashley. She was really healthy, but they started noticing something strange about her behavior, especially in the middle of the night. They would hear her laughing and talking to someone like she was playing with them.
Hi, Bears.
Hi, Bears. How are ya? So Doretta would sneak into the middle of the night to her bedroom to tell her to be quiet and go head back to sleep. And she would find Ashley sitting on her bed with her arms reached out like this, like she was getting ready to hug someone. But no one was there. Now, one night when Ron was working late and Doretta was up late watching TV, She became spooked because the sudden real hard hammering knock was on her front door, and this was about 2 in the morning. She wasn't afraid because she knew that that used to be an old motel. So she figured, well, maybe somebody just got stranded. They saw the old motel sign, figured they'd knock on the door and say, hey, do you have a room for rent? So she went to the door to check to see if someone was out there, and there was nobody there. A few minutes later, it happened again, but this time it was louder. What surprised her was that she noticed that the doorknob was rattling, like somebody was trying to force the door to get in. And so she ran to the window to see who was there, but again, no one was there. The banging stopped, and she could hear the sounds of leaves crunching on the porch, like as if somebody was exiting off the porch after that had happened. She became scared at this point and tried to call the police, but the phone line was dead.
Of course.
Since she carried no guns in the house, she hurried up and ran to the kitchen, and she grabbed a butcher knife. And then she went back to the window to see if she could see anyone. What she did see was a woman and two boys walking up the road towards her house. She knew who they were. Her name was Barbara Summers and her two boys. Barbara apologized for being so late and said that their cart just suddenly died. She said it happened as they were passing their house. So she asked them inside, and because she said she knew there was some intruder lurking around outside, she told them that she didn't want them standing out there. So Barb and Doretta both looked around to see if they could see any signs of this intruder, and they both saw nothing. But Barbara said she wanted to call her husband for help. But Doretta said to Barbara, hey, the phone lines are down. You're not going to have any luck with it. But Barbara said, you know what, let me give it a try anyhow. And when Barbara picked up the phone was working again. So she was able to call her husband. Her husband came over. The other strange thing is when they went up to check the car started right up. There was nothing wrong with the car either. So all these events are already starting to happen. They haven't been in the house all that long. After they left, Doretta went back to check on the kids. Both kids stayed in the same room because of the renovations, so Doretta stayed in the room with the kids that night, taking the butcher knife, and she climbed in little Ashley's bed with Ashley, and she put the butcher knife with the handle up between the bed slat and the mattress so that if she needed to get it right away, she could hurry up and grab it, and she was ready. Mama Bear was kicking in. So she climbed in Ashley's bed with her and slid the knife down between the frame and the mattress with the handle sticking up. She fell into a really deep sleep, but she woke up with the feeling of extreme pressure on her jaw. Ashley, who was only about 1.5 years old at that time, was straddling Doretta's chest, and she was pushing that knife really, really hard, the blade of it, into Doretta's mouth. And the blade, thank goodness, was pressing on Doretta's braces. And if they wouldn't have caught on her braces, which this little girl doesn't have a lot of strength as it is, but thank goodness when she was pushing and caught the braces, she couldn't push it any further. If she didn't have braces, Doretta said that knife would have went right back to the straight back of her neck. Mm-hmm. And this poor little girl would have been responsible for it. Now, Doretta grabbed the knife, and Ashley fell backwards in fear. Stephen, the boy that was in the bed next to him, their son, he woke up from the noise and saw everything. She calmed both of the kids down and then hurry up and ran the knife back to the kitchen. She was so shaken at this time, but thank goodness, since when Barbara and them came over, that was already 2:00 there. So by this time, it was the wee hours of the morning, and it was already starting to get light outside. So thank God that crazy night was all over for her. Like, what more could happen? So for weeks after that incident, Steve kept on calling poor little Ashley Lizzie Borden. He wouldn't even call her regular name. He just kept on going up and calling her little Lizzie Borden, which I thought was kind of cruel, and the parents should have said, don't you do that, but kids will be kids, and
especially boys will be boys.
Boys and little sisters. Now, by Christmas time, they needed more income in the house because of all the repairs, and Doretta started working at a nearby restaurant. It was called the Coach House, and she would be working only evenings, but she always got home about midnight. Now, one night when she came home, knowing that everyone was already asleep, she noticed the screen door and back door of the kitchen wide open. So surprised, she knew Ron would never leave them unlocked like that. But she went up and woke him up and said, "Well, why did you leave doors unlocked, especially when you know we had that incident with the intruder a while back?" He told her he knew nothing about why it got open, that he knows for a fact that he closed and locked all the doors and windows before they all went up to bed. She got real annoyed with him and went back downstairs to get something to eat. She heard a car door then slamming outside. She rushed to the window to see who was out there, and she saw a man. He was sitting in her car. She was going to run up to get Ron, but at the same time, another car was coming around the bend down towards her car with the headlights shining through, and the man disappeared. He was no longer there. So she went up to bed, but completely boggled. Now, come 1988, Doretta was bathing Ashley one night, she was about 2 years old at this time, and she was standing in the tub. Now, Ashley liked those little crayon soaps, so she was standing in the tub and she was drawing pictures and that on the side of the towels and everything and that with her little crayon soap. And mother was washing her down and everything. And she said she looked down, and because of the soap bubbles and that was formed from the water splashing up and that, she said there was breaks in the soap bubbles, which is common, but she happened to look down in one of the areas where the soap bubbles was, and she said there was the head and shoulders of a woman lying face down in the tub. She said now little Ashley didn't see it, but it scared the shit out of her, and she hurried up and grabbed little Ashley, ran down the hallway with little Ashley in her arms. She kept on asking her mom what was wrong, and she was dripping wet, naked and everything, because her mother hurried up and grabbed her. So she realized the little girl standing there dripping wet, she got to wrap a towel around her. So she said, "I'm going to have to go back to the bathroom to get a towel." So she trollops back to the bathroom to get a towel to cover up little Ashley. Nothing was in the bathroom. Bathroom was all back to normal, like nothing had happened at all. She didn't mention anything to Ron at that time, because Ron at that time, he was really, really skeptical. Anytime she told him anything, he kind of like brushed it aside, or he always had a logical explanation. And I think she said she thinks at that time that he was thinking she might have been having a mental breakdown or something from all the stress, from all the repair work and everything with the house. Now, in 1988, that same year, little Ashley turned 2. She got a talking doll for her birthday. And it was one of those dolls that when you talk to it, it mimics your voice back. She loved that doll and she took it everywhere. The doll, though, eventually started going off without it even being triggered. Doretta would always hear, "Mama, Mama, Mama," coming from this stupid doll. And she could see literally the doll's mouth opening and closing to the words "Mama." And the thing would just not stop talking. So she tried to shut it off. It still would keep on going, "Mama, Mama," and just chattering away.
Burn it.
So she ended up taking the batteries out of it. Finally, that did stop it, but that was just too much for Doretta to handle. So she got rid of the doll.
I would have just got rid of it. I would have burned it.
Got rid of the doll. So now Doretta said she noticed that these strange things seemed to target Ashley, seemed to follow her around. Besides her nighttime talks to no one, she was starting to stroll around the house in the middle of the night, and she would go down to the kitchen. She would grab milk and cookies, and she'd go into the living room and watch TV. Okay, well, they knew she was going around. They should have kind of watched, like, where's this little girl going? It's a big house. So Ron and Doretta, the next morning, they would always find like 2 glasses of milk and 2 plates of cookies out. like, okay, why 2 glasses of milk, two plates of cookies? When they asked Ashley about it, she told them about the little girl Lisa, who was her new friend. Lisa visited her in her room at night and was very sad because she had no home and she had no mother. She said Lisa lived in the attic, but she wasn't alone. She said there were others, but not all of them were friendly. I think that's when I don't care. House, I'm out.
That's
Someone, I'm out. I'm done. Mom, Dad, you have room for us over there? We ain't staying here no more. But anyhow, one day Loretta's sister Marilee came to visit. She hadn't seen her for about 7 years. She told her what was happening and how she felt she was going crazy. Marilee was kind of open to these type of things, and she told her not to automatically assume that she was going crazy. So she brought up the possibility of something paranormal being in that house. Now, she asked Doretta if she had a Ouija board. She said that they had bought one for Stephen a few years back, and they did give it a try, but nothing happened. She said it was just nothing but a silly toy. Marilee said that they do work and to go ahead and go get it. So she figured they could use it to try to figure out what's going on in the house. Nope. They started asking questions, and it started moving immediately. Doretta assumed her sister was pushing the planchette, and then at one point her sister asked about their mother, who had caused them a lot of damage when they were little, and the planchette shot right off the board and onto the floor. Doretta automatically assumed that her sister did that, and so they picked it up off the floor and tried again. Then they asked for the name of the spirits. First came the letter C, and then came the letter K. They asked CK how she died or how they died, and the letters formed the word murder. Her sister asked if the spirits liked the members of the family and went through each family member name by name. After each name, there was no response at all. But as soon as they got to Doretta's name, it immediately went to no. So it did not like Doretta. Strangely, her sister started shouting out, like she just started, her behavior changed, and she just all of a sudden yelled, "You pervert!" And her sister said, after she yelled it out, she said, "I don't know why I just yelled that out." She said, "That's strange." She said, "It just came out of me." So they were getting very uncomfortable, and they decided to close the board and put it away. So apparently her sister knew a lot about Ouija boards, how to open it, how to close it, and all that stuff, which is good, but they should have left that Ouija board alone. The next day, a hairdryer burst into flames, and light bulbs in the house just started exploding. Her sister begged Doretta to move her family out immediately, but Doretta thought that they must be caused by natural events, and she dismissed all those incidents. Yeah, just because out of the blue,
she is delusional.
Cactus Lisa better start paying rent and chip in for grocery bills. Exactly, little Lisa. At least I think it will. Little Lisa. Anyhow, one morning, Doretta woke up and found horrible bruises all over Stephen's back, chest, and arms. He didn't know how he got them. She took him to the doctor, and they could not find out why he had them. And the family said, well, nobody knew, and they didn't even suspect any kind of abuse or anything like that. So there was no explanation for them. But as quickly as they appeared, they disappeared, and they never came back again. Now, by this time, they needed more income in the house, so Doretta quit her restaurant job, and she started training as an accountant. And so she took up accounting classes online, and so she had a lot of books, a lot of paperwork, all that stuff. One night, while she was working on her papers in the kitchen, she looked up, and she saw a shape as somebody quickly jumping in the doorway and out of sight. She first thought it was one of the kids, and they were trying to play a prank on her by spying on her. And she went and checked, but everyone was in bed. The children also started seeing these figures. Doretta even saw a little girl. Could it be Lisa, Ashley's friend? Or was she just losing her mind? Ron started thinking that because of all the stress Doretta was experiencing with all the expenses and repairs, going back to school, raising the kids, whatnot, he started thinking, hey, it's just taking its toll out on Doretta. She might be having a breakdown. Things got weird when a relative from Kentucky called one day, and she said she had been trying to call Doretta for 3 weeks, but the phone was always answered by a little girl who kept on saying that Doretta and Ron weren't home. It wasn't Ashley that was answering that phone, so who was it? A few nights later, Ashley woke up screaming in the middle of the night. When Doretta got there, loud banging was coming from the attic, and Ashley was screaming in terror, and she was screaming out strange things like, he's hurting her, he's hitting her, make him stop. Things started going missing. There were things like wedding rings and even their marriage license. And then this was where it got real strange. One night when Doretta was down in the living room working on her accountant work, she opened up one of her textbooks and there was her marriage license. So she questioned Ron because they were starting to already experience a lot of the strain on their marriage because of all this stuff going on. So she figured that maybe Ron put the marriage license in her textbook as like a not so funny, humorous joke on her, like a hint. Things got worse. One day she went to a convenience store and she parked alongside a blue car. And when she looked across, a woman was staring at her. The strange thing is that the woman that was staring at her looked exactly like herself. It was her doppelganger. She had an awful wide smile. She lowered her head at Doretta and then drove off. Now, this is not the first encounter that Doretta had with this woman that was her doppelganger that looked just like her.
It's apparently very bad to see your
Yeah,
doppelganger.
yep. Mimics of any kind is not good. So, excuse me, I needed to wet my whistle. At this point, she was really starting to get concerned about her frame of mind, and she thought for sure she might be having a breakdown. She said that's the only logical explanation that she could come up with. So she didn't know what to do, so she decided to go to the doctors and get some medical tests done and see if maybe she had a tumor, something was causing this, something was going on. But when she went and got all these medical tests and that done, everything come back clear. Now, things continued, and the two of them grew further apart. At one point, Doretta asked Ron for a divorce. He said he would take the children if they did. He also said to her, which was odd and even colder, if you ever have an affair, I will kill the other man without any hesitation. He said, he said, look, I would do that and it wouldn't bother me because I don't have a conscience. Doretta now knew at this point that that was not Ron's typical behavior, and it was really confusing her because Ron had never said or acted like that in any way, shape, before. Now, when Stephen was 15, Ron had flipped out and started hitting Stephen over a water valve in the shower. But Stephen was old enough that he hit back. But when Doretta tried to intervene, Ron pushed her into the living room, and Stephen had bruises and had to go to Louisville to stay with his grandfather. Ron said he barely remembered anything that happened. He said he don't remember that happening, or very little of it. I think he remembered the fight itself, but not to that caliber.
Like he's being possessed.
Now, Doretta's sister Nancy had been released from Madison State Hospital, which Doretta didn't know she was there 4 years prior. And when Doretta found out that they had been living in a shelter, she invited her sister and their kids to come stay with them for a bit. With the situation that it wasn't very smart, but she thought that's her sister. She can't have them living in a shelter. So, hey, it wasn't a good idea at the time, but she thought it was a good idea. Before long, they began to experience things in the house too. One night, Jessica, one of her nieces, started screaming out in the middle of the night. She said that a horrible old woman was standing at the foot of Ashley's bed. Now, Ashley, keep in mind, is the little tiny daughter of Doretta and Ron. Then Stephen started having angry outbursts, just like Ron had been having. He actually grabbed his mother and threw her into the living room after she said no about a question he had asked. And he jumped on her chest. And she said his eyes were raging. And the only way he stopped is she kept on looking at him and she kept on saying, I love you, Stephen. I love you, Stephen. I love you, Stephen. And it broke him out of that anger and he let her alone. But the next day, when he passed her, he noticed all these bruises all over her body. He said, Mom, what happened? And she told him what happened. And he said he had no memory of that whatsoever. And he looked at her and he says, I need to be locked up. If I did that to you, I need to be locked up. By the time Doretta was getting mean, by this time, Doretta was already starting to get mean to her sister. She found herself grabbing her sister by the throat on one occasion. Ron's temper got worse. He smacked Doretta in the face and split her lip, snapping her head back against the wall. He left the next day to go to Louisville to stay with his mother because of what happened. But as he was driving away, the further distance he got away from the house, the more his normal self came back. He was his old self again. He didn't feel any anger or nothing. The couple talked for hours on the phone and agreed to get therapy to save their marriage, and then Ron came back home. Now, things improved for them for a bit, and one night they decided to have a nice romantic evening and to rekindle their love, but the fire alarm went off. They were drinking wine downstairs, and smoke was coming from the upstairs in their bedroom. Now, Doretta didn't know it, but Ron had put flowers up in the bedroom and he had put 2 candles up there. He had them lit. He had the moment all set up real romantic. The 2 candles were lit for when they came up. They managed to get the kids to safety out until the fire department came, but they wanted to know what was the cause of the fire. So when the fire department came and the bedding and everything was all fire and the room was all bad, but the 2 candles were still standing upright. They weren't knocked over or anything, and there was nothing near them. So how in the heck did the bedding start fire to set that whole room on fire? So things weird.
Spontaneously combusting bed.
I don't know. The whole house smelled of smoke the next day, and they said all the carpets and everything were so ruined just from the smell of the smoke that they had to replace everything. Now, fortunately, with them buying a house, they had house insurance, so they were able to get no more out-of-pocket money. They were able to get all of this stuff covered from the insurance. Now, on that same day, Stephen came home and he found a lit cigarette on the rug up in the bathroom, and it was already getting ready to start a fire. And he went down and he yelled at his mother. He says, how careless of behavior could you have leaving a cigarette up there on the floor? We just had a fire and there you are, Mom, smoking a cigarette on the carpet up in the bathroom. She says, Stephen, I haven't been up in that bathroom for several hours. And even if I would have dropped a cigarette, it would have either been totally in flames by now or it would have been snuffed out. It wouldn't have been just after all that time, just burning. So then they started thinking, okay, wait a minute. We had an intruder that was hanging around the house before. Maybe we have an intruder coming in. Maybe they're even the ones that set the fire in the bedroom. You know, they had to think of something. There had to be an explanation for this. So she talked it over with Ron, and they thought maybe intruder got into the house. And they made sure from that point that everyone, before they went up to bed, locked all doors, all windows, checked everything, make sure there was nobody in the house. But then Ashley said something odd. She said she knows who started the fire. And she looked up at them. She said, it's the people up in the attic. She said there were ghosts up there. And she said there was a little girl with no mommy. and an old man who was mad at them, the Johnsons, and he was the one that started the fire. Now, Doretta and Ron talked this over, discussing if the house was really haunted or not, but Ron just dismissed everything as just a string of bad luck. Guys, listen to your wives, listen to your children. When you say something is going on, pay attention.
Especially a 2-year-old. 2-year-old is not just going to be like, Mommy, Daddy, there's people up in the attic, and their names are this, and this is what they look like.
And yeah, she's describing them, and she's telling them what they're saying and all this stuff. And right at the time when this stuff is happening. Now, September 13th, 1991, Doretta rented a movie out. And she had Stephen watching it with her that night just to keep his mom company. But he got bored by it. It was the movie Postcards from the Edge. So he got up and he decided he was going to go to the bathroom. She was real relaxed and she continued watching the movie. And she said she hadn't felt this good in a long time. So she was enjoying a nice, quiet movie watching, relaxing evening. All of a sudden, she heard rumbling, almost like growl-like, coming like from an animal in the room with her. She said it went away, but 10 minutes later, it returned again. This time, she knew for sure that it was growling and nothing else, and that it was in the room. Now, by this time, Stephen came rushing in, and he asked her, "Were you just clearing your throat? Because I heard something weird, and it was coming from this room." Next thing you know, a loud roaring came from under the floor. They were both so scared that they ran for the car outside and they took off. She said she wrote in her book that they were both crying and shaking, and it was so bad that they became physically ill, and they had to pull off to the side of the road so they could both get out and puke.
Wow.
They stayed at her mother-in-law's house that night, and Ron's mom thought it was just an animal and decided to call an exterminator. She said she would even pay for it. But both Doretta and Stephen knew that it was not an animal that was making that noise. And how did they get that badly sick where they had to pull off the side of the road and throw up? When they went back to the house, they found another surprise. When she turned on the light in the laundry room, the letters C and K were painted on the wall. And they were the same letters that showed up on the Ouija board the night that her and her sister were talking on the Ouija board. Now, Doretta arranged to talk to a priest. Father Jeff offered to come with a colleague and bless the house. When they came, they moved room to room. They were sprinkling holy water on all the rooms and saying prayers. And in the kitchen, though, when they got there, the back door kept on slamming and the doorknob kept on rattling when they were doing the blessing, like someone was trying to come in. Then all of a sudden it opened and slammed shut. The priest thought maybe it was the wind, but it was calm outside. There was no wind going on outside. They said that the house did have a presence and they was hopeful that the house would be safe. So they were hoping that with the blessing and everything, the house was going to be all right. Wow. Doretta tried to look into the history of the house, but a week later, things in the house escalated. Doretta saw a man in the doorway one morning, said he looked like a man from the Mad magazine, that Alfred E. Newman. She said, that's not a face that she wanted to see. She says, that's creepy enough. On another night, Stephen rushed into the living room and he said he saw a figure in the hall standing by Ashley's bedroom. He said it was like a big dark blob, but it had a head and arms. Now, Ashley said, yeah, that's the old man. He's always around us. He doesn't like us. Doretta said that she had seen the same figure sitting in corners and going from room to room. Now, one night, Doretta felt pressure on her legs when she and Ron were in bed. She told Ron she could not move her legs at all. She said, I can't set up. I can't move my legs at all. So Ron sat up, but he kind of sat up like on his elbow, like this position, so he could kind of watch what was going on. And he saw her nightgown rise up like something was tugging on it upwards. And she said she could feel cold fingers like caressing her legs. Ron couldn't believe his eyes. He said, "What in the hell's this?" His skepticism soon started turning to reality when he saw something else. One day he was in the bathroom while Doretta was taking a shower, and she had a strange vision of something sharp with sharp fingernails pulling and dragging on, trying to pull her down below the tub. She cried out, and Ron looked over, and he said the bottom of the bathtub was covered with blood from Doretta's feet. They checked her feet and found many really deep slits, like something was trying to dig into them. There was nothing in the tub that could have caused this. And the next morning, they were already gone. It was like that thing with Abby on her arm. We saw it appearing before our eyes at night. Next morning, it was completely gone.
I still want to know that scratch that was on my face. It didn't disappear for like a good week, though.
I don't know. That was kind of crazy. I was gonna look for something over there. I can't remember.
And I know I didn't do it myself because it just started.
Well, you kind of went like this, but on the other side, but it didn't.
Yeah,
like almost
I
break the skin. Yeah, you did. You tried to recreate it, and you couldn't. So
I thought it was my nails, but
the priest's blessing seemed to have made things worse. So they decided to take the advice of her sister, and they gave in to a psychic. Now, she contacted Jordan Pitkoff. Ron wasn't happy about it because it cost him $250 to book this guy. And back at that time, they were already strapped financially as it was, but $250 back in the 80s, that's pretty much money. That's hard for the average person to come up with. But she went and booked it anyhow. She was like at her point, like, we need to have some kind of answers there. All this weird shit's going on. We need to have answers. So Jordan wanted the entire family there. He said, and that was very important. That was the only big thing that he requested, that the entire family stay there, because he said that family altogether could create a really good high energy that could defeat what was ever in that house. Now, until he could arrive a few days later, he told them to gather each night in a circle and pray the Lord's Prayer. They followed what he wanted, but the back doors of the house would slam open and shut. They would hear animals outside barking and growling, yet there's no signs of any animals outside. And at one moment during those few days, Doretta saw a man attacking a woman in the bathtub while a little girl was crying for him to stop. The woman was his wife, and after drowning her, she watched him drag her body out across the bathroom floor and into a hole into the floor. And then he saw the man take a shovel and slam it into the little daughter's face, and then he dragged her body into the hole too. Now, she wasn't sure if this was a vision that she was seeing or she was actually experiencing a residual energy, a residual moment in time that was just repeating itself over and over and over again. Now, this is freaking her out, all this stuff. And they just had this entire house blessed. When the psychic arrived with his pal Terry, they confirmed Ashley's story. The house had multiple spirits, including a female child, various women, and a man. And Ashley's bedroom was the worst room in the house because it was like directly below the attic. There were several malignant presences there, and he said that they needed to close that room off immediately and never use it again. He told them to play Gregorian chants in the house, also in their cars. He said that they would try to provoke them, but don't allow them to. Do not communicate with them whatsoever under any circumstances. So soon Ron began talking about the hauntings, not even acknowledging or not that it was Doretta's imagination anymore. He actually started accepting it as hauntings. Now, Jordan called Doretta up at one time and asked her to come to his house, and it was an odd request, and he said, bring some photos. He said, bring photos of all of your male relatives. And she thought, okay, that was strange, but Ron and her started talking to her that this is good. We're going to check this guy out and see how good of a psychic he really is. So she gathered up a lot of pictures of her relatives, But they started grabbing other pictures, like of his friends and male people they knew and stuff like that, and threw them in with the male relatives. And they said, well, if the psychic pulls out one of them and say, hey, this is your brother or this is your father and he's haunting you, they would know he's full of shit and they could call him out as a fake. Well, as he was going through these random photos, Jordan picked out one in particular, and he said to her, he said, this man hurt you, didn't he, when you were very young? And he pointed to an old picture of her Uncle Ross. Uncle Ross did hurt her when she was very young, and what he did certainly traumatized her. At one night, she woke up to her Uncle Ross crouching on the floor, lifting her nightgown up. Does that sound familiar? Ron, her husband, witnessed the same thing that night with her. Was he one of the presences, spirits of that house? It was quite disturbing. Now, poltergeist activity continued, and they now started to hear voices come through the radio and the television, almost like what we as investigators, when we pull out a spirit box, how you listen to the radio waves and voices come out and you distinguish from the radio waves these voices. That was happening with their radio and their television. They should have moved out immediately, but the question was, could they sell the place? It was on the market for 2 years prior when they got it, and even though they put all that money in it, what if it didn't sell? What if they didn't make a profit off of it? If they did sell it, and if it didn't sell for 2 years prior, whether they put these renovations or not, there's no guarantee. And that was too much of a risk for them to take, with them being that financially strapped. So in the car one night when Doretta was driving, she felt Ron staring at her from the passenger seat. Oh, they told her too, they said, make sure, they said, this whatever's in the house, it's going to follow you. It's not just here in the house, because it seemed to be with the family now. So just be careful when you go play the Gregorian chants and everything and that, because of that. So one night in the car when Doretta, she was driving, and she kept on feeling Ron staring at her from the passenger seat. And it's that feeling that, when your man's staring at you and he's looking at you with love in his eyes. And so she looked over at him and she saw him, giving this real nice, loving smile. And he looked at her and he said, I love you. And he turned back to her and she got that smile on her face and she kept on driving. Few moments later, she felt that stare again. So she looked over again. This time she didn't see Ron staring back at her. She saw Ron staring face towards the road ahead, but she saw a black male figure sitting on Ron's lap, and it was just staring at her with his head cocked to the side. And then this figure actually went and got absorbed down into Ron's body. And she told Ron that there's someone in the car, there's one of them in the car with us, and it just went inside of you. Now, back home, Ron turned angry again, stomping and shouting at Doretta. He said he was sick of all the ghost talk. He blamed her for being tired, for him being tired and his lack of sleep. She kept on telling him, she says, she's seen that he was in that state, so she pulled off what she did with Stephen that day when he is in that state. I love you, Ron. I love you, Ron. I love you, Ron. And that calmed him down, and his anger ceased somewhat. Now, one night, Ashley woke up screaming that somebody was biting her. That was it. They arranged for the kids to go somewhere else, even though it was against what the psychic Jordan said. And by surprise, then, a knock at the door one day. So they took the kids, I think, to her parents' house or his parents' house. But by surprise, a knock at the door one day came, and 2 priests were there to bless the house. One of the 2 priests was there. During all of this haunting, when the priests and that were there to begin with to check out the first time, apparently the one priest called the Warrens. Doretta left a letter. She wrote a letter to the Warrens during this time. And Lorraine told Doretta that she believed that house was infested with demons, not spirits. And the priest was there to say that they received a phone call from the Archbishop of Lafayette because Lorraine called them and requesting an exorcism on the property. Now, the Archbishop spoke to his superiors and they all agreed to go ahead and do that. So apparently, Lorraine did get her letter. She read it and she was concerned enough that there's something going on. Maybe she picked up some of the vibes, whatnot, and she hurried up and called the Archbishop, said, "Hey, these people need help." So she went and they were going to do an exorcism. The exorcist called Doretta one night and she was expecting comfort and support, but she was disappointed because he was being really rude to her on the phone, almost mocking her lack of faith. He said rude things to her and told her that her family would pay for her sins. He berated her for not going to church, and he was disgusted that she was using a psychic. He even mocked her for having children out of wedlock. So apparently they kept on using the name Ron and Doretta Johnson, but they weren't legally married. They never went to a church and got married. They were common law marriage. They were together. He insisted the house was evil and the only way was to have the church sanctioning an exorcism. They picked a date for the exorcism, and he insisted that the children be baptized and that her and Ron would officially have to get married in the church. That way the kids would no longer be considered illegitimate. They had no choice at this point because one night Ashley woke up choking, saying there was a snake wrapped around her throat. So now she was having these type of vivid nightmares or whatever you want to call them. Enough was enough, so they decided to get out for at least until the exorcism was done. Whatever was there seemed to follow them. Ron was at work and he got a call that Stephen was in a horrible car accident. Doretta rushed to the hospital and then Ron arrived shortly after. Stephen was laying in the hospital bed in a neck brace, all covered in blood. Thank goodness they said that he only had minor injuries and he would be okay. But the sad thing is that someone else involved was not okay. The man was only 23 years old, and Stephen said he was driving when the accelerator shot to the floor without him doing it, and he tried to stop, but he couldn't. He said he crashed, the car flipped 3 times and slammed into a pickup truck. Now, the man from the pickup truck was thrown from his vehicle. He did not make it. He was convinced that whatever was in their house just tried to kill him in that car accident. Now, the exorcism had to be postponed until the verdict came back from Stephen's accident because obviously, since Stephen was driving and there was a death, they had to investigate and make sure there was no intentional involvement and all that. Church wanted no part of it. They didn't want that publicity. Doretta thinks that they were just too scared to come to the house. So she called Jordan again. He suggested them perform an exorcism that coming Sunday. Doretta said, okay. Now I got to pull up something on here because I don't know if I'll be able to get all this finished. I don't want to run too late, but I want to make all this on here. Now, activity at the apartment. So they went and they actually started, even though they didn't have the money, they started renting out an apartment. Now, activity at the apartment was quiet. They were living in Kent for a while. Then it started up again. And it was the same way as before. They would start hearing scratches on the wall, then poltergeist activity and stuff like that. And it got to the point where Doretta said she had enough and she got dissatisfied with Jordan's involvement, the psychic. Nothing was working, and she said she just wanted to move out of Indiana completely. At this point, Indiana was not a good state for her. This has not been nothing but a traumatizing situation. She was done. Doretta started actually studying and reading up on the paranormal at that point. Her sister's words kind of must have stuck in her mind. So she ran across a topic about psychokinesis, where she said it could use someone's intense emotions, their stress, any trauma, anything in their life going on, and it could unleash physical effects on the environment, including paranormal activity. So she said, could this haunting be coming from their stress, from their emotions, and not from ghosts or hauntings after all? And she said, what one of the family members was responsible for, or what if one of the family members was responsible for this in some way? And it seemed like the activity followed wherever they went. When it was the scratching, the sounds, animal noises, things disappearing, everything started all over again. Now, when they moved to the apartment in Louisville, they could hear scratching behind the walls, objects vanished. When they were throwing a birthday party for Ashley, a balloon started to float around the room in an odd way. And then they heard a scream, a real loud scream coming from the balcony, and it sounded like an animal. But like some kind of animal that they've never heard before. But they got that sense of growing evil around. Now, one evening, or well, it wasn't an evening, one event threatened little Ashley's life. Now, she was sitting with Ashley in her rented apartment. Her daughter looked fine. She looked like she was in good spirits. She was all happy and jolly. And they were getting ready to go to their granddad's house. So Doretta carried on what she was normally doing. She was doing her packing and getting everything ready. But minutes later, Doretta was shocked when the apartment door opened and there was little Ashley staggering in the door. She said, well, wait a minute. How did you even get outside when you were just inside? Like, just totally boggled her. Well, when she looked, Doretta saw blood. Blood was glistening around Ashley's throat and shirt collar. She rushed over and she screamed and she was like, for Ron to come here, like, what's going on? And they both saw a clear cut around her neck. It wasn't really that deep, but it was visible enough, and it was enough to break the skin where you could see blood. At this point, Ron went outside to the tree that was outside, and there was a cord hanging from the tree, a long cord from one of the branches. It looked like it had been cut off at the end, as if like he just imagined the scene that could have happened, and a voice that came from behind him. He turned around and one of the neighbors was there. The neighbor said, are you that little girl's father? And he said, yeah. Why? Did you see something? The neighbor said he had been in his apartment watching TV, and he heard the balcony doors open, and he heard what he thought was a cat screaming outside. He rushed to the window, and he was horrified to see the little girl dangling from the tree. He yelled for his wife to bring him a knife, and he went out and he hurried up and cut her down from the tree. But it took a while because he said the cord was just coiled all around her neck like a snake. So when she was having that dream about a snake being wrapped around her neck, she was probably actually seeing this about ready to happen. Well, they rushed Ashley to the hospital, and the staff had serious concerns. But Ashley kept telling them, look, I was playing in the tree when I got tied up accidentally in this cord. They x-rayed her neck, and for a while they thought she might have broken of it. But actually it turned out that it was just a blood pooling in the x-ray. But the staff were astonished when 1 week later after this incident, all of the marks on Ashley's neck just completely disappeared. They were healed. There was nothing there. Then in 1992, when Dr. William got back in touch with Doretta, he was the psychologist on staff, and he specialized in psychokinesis in poltergeist cases. He offered to come to the house and help with the case. But he said it wasn't free, of course. He estimated his fee would be about $2,000. He said about $200 a day plus expenses. They couldn't afford that. There was just no way they could afford it. So so the doctor had an idea. He says, why don't you just get a TV company or a network to come out to film this? And that might mean the studio could pay for the time and not you. Doretta didn't want anything to do with that. She said she didn't want this thing to go publicly, and she hung up on him. But then she mentioned this to her sister, Mary Lee, and her sister was furious. She said, "You've gone beyond the luxury of your privacy now. Your family are in peril. This is all. You've got to do this. It's your only option." And so she picked up the phone, called him back, and said, "Okay, let's go ahead and do this. If you can get the TV deal, just please help us." A few days later, they called back, and Fox TV network were ready to send a crew over. Now, it is on the Johnson's family story on a segmented show called Sightings. Now, on June 25th of 1992, the Sightings crew came to Madison. They all stayed in the hillside, and so did Doretta. While there, the gentleman that they talked to Doretta in depth and was asking her everything that was happening. He was particularly interested in how the activities seemed to increase after the church got involved. He had a really fascinating idea suggesting that ideas we're putting into Doretta's head were influenced by the haunting. In other words, he wondered if, for example, when the church called it demonic, it became demonic. So he's kind of given the power of suggestion that whatever the church did and said, that kind of gave the power, that kind of almost created, gave the power. Yeah.
She believes that it's demonic, so it is.
But by creating involuntary psychokinesis. So the filming started for the Sightings episode at the house. It started with a session where 3 mediums attempted to contact the spirits. The director and Ron were astonished how accurate they were. However, the producer of the show on day one was desperate to try to capture ghostly activity on the camera, and he asked, "What activities seem to rile the spirits?" Like, no, you don't want to do that. And he says, like, and Ron said, "You mean like when we play the Gregorian chants?" Or he said, apparently when they open up a can of paint, that freaks out the spirits. So Joe started doing all these things to provoke activity. He bought a bunch of tapes and was playing them. He got some paint. He painted a large peace sign on the wall. Nothing happened. So he started striding around the house, demanding the presence itself.
Stupid TV producer.
Yeah, saying things like, "This is a direct quote. Show yourself, you pencil dick bastard. Come out and face me if you got the guts."
I hope he gets scratched.
William was not impressed by this, and he said to Joe, "You've got to be careful there. This is not a game." Well, at 4:17 a.m., something did indeed show itself. It happened when Doretta was sitting in the kitchen, and she was totally exhausted. She looked up, and she saw a male entity standing in the kitchen doorway, and it was slowly moving towards her. Now, of course, she was frightened, and she quickly, but it turned to anger, and she spoke to the figure and said, "You've wrecked my life, but you're not even brave enough to show yourself on camera." So she kind of provoked it too, and that's not good. When she said this, the dark figure seemed to start glowing. Stephen walked into the kitchen, saw the glowing figure too. In shock, he backed out of the kitchen and motioned for one of the cameramen to come in so they could see it too. And for a moment, they just stared at this thing, and he said, "Oh shit." He'd just been outside of the house, and he had left his camera out there. Now the rest of the house could hear some sort of commotion happening in the kitchen. They all raced to see what was going on. But when the producer burst into the room with his camera, a bright light shining, and he kept shouting, "Where is it? Where is it?" He saw nothing. So while apart from the cameraman, everybody saw it except for Craig, who was standing there in total shock, looked like he was burst into tears at the moment. He said, "I can't believe it. I can't believe what my eyes saw. This was incredible." And let's see, this was incredibly frustrating because Doretta said that if Joe hadn't come barging in like that, maybe they could have captured it actually on camera. So Joe had to settle for just a camera interview. Um, he came, and because I came across like he was really brash because it was all about the film, all about the film. It was like there was no concern about what was actually going on. Like, did you capture it on film? I mean, I guess we all get like that when we're investigating, but not at the sake of somebody's safety. So, but they said he was trying to make a TV show. So, um, let's see. So at one point, he needed to use the bathroom and told Doretta that he was too scared to go up there alone. She said, well, I'm not going to go up there with you. He said, okay. So he was so desperate that he turned away from the bathroom and went outside on the lawn. He didn't want to go up in that bathroom at all. And so he didn't capture anything on film anyhow. So that episode never hadn't at that point aired yet. Most of this here now is like just going about what was going on in the with the film. She had strange. Let's see. Doretta was able to talk more to people about the home, including a woman who had lived there. Her name was Georgia Jeff. She too had strange experiences in the house, but she shared more information than even what Doretta was giving out. She told them that there was a woman that died in the house and the past that had taken too many pills. So she was probably that woman that they saw up in the bathtub.
Probably.
From overdose from taking too much pills. Ironically, guess what the woman's name was? Caroline Kersey, C.K. Doretta was shocked. She remembered those initials from the Ouija board and on the laundry room wall. And she said, where did this poor woman die? And when she heard the answer, upstairs in the bathtub, her mind raced back to that moment when she saw that woman in the bathtub, scared the crap out of her. So then they started filming these episodes. Now, these episodes, one of the reasons why they started filming these and they thought that they were good because they thought if they filmed these episodes, the Johnsons offered like the royalties and the showings of the episodes could get enough money to get the house sold and to be able to afford a place to stay while the house was being sold so that they could live without struggling and not without any worries. But let's see. So at one point he did go to the bank and he asked, let's see, he went to the bank to apply for an equity loan against the house, and they asked what if he couldn't pay it back, because the bank, of course, when they give out money, they want to know that you're able to pay it back because it was going to be a huge sum of money that they were going to use for equity. And he says, well, hey, our show's going to be aired on the sightings. I'll be making money from that. The vice president of the bank called him saying that they were going to withdraw the equity loan officers. And he asked why. And he says, the guy at the bank said, because your house is haunted. They didn't want to deal with giving an equity loan out to somebody that had a haunted house because they knew no matter what kind of money that they raised or that they got, if they sold it, they wouldn't be getting the money off of that house because the chances are that house isn't going to sell because now it's all over TV and everybody knows that that house is haunted. So, let's see. So they kept on going on and filming. She kept on using the psychics and everything, started getting advice from them and them telling what was going on. She went through all the story of when she was a kid and all the stuff that she had gone through herself, and they were wondering if some of this trauma from her past wasn't like a catalyst what started bringing on a lot of this activity here now in this house that they're experiencing. apparently, let's see, though she was fully aware that let's see, there was experience that she had tried to avoid and she buried them with pain. And one of the psychics, they walked through those dark chapters of her life, and I guess they put her in like hypnosis, and they brought up some of the trauma that was happening to another child, like it was to another child. Though she was fully aware that the stuff that was coming out, they were talking about her herself. As she watched this, she could tell that her own mother hated her and had been complicit in the abuse that she was experiencing, and that her mother abandoned her in her life, and the care of the man that had taken over for her, I guess he beat her with a belt. So she had gone through a lot of trauma in her life growing up. And he told she said, take a look at that little girl again and just imagine grabbing her in your arms and giving her a big hug, and more or less the release all of that pain and all that trauma that she felt. And tell, that way it made the little girl herself feel like she wasn't being abandoned, and the hurt, it would help the hurt heal. It started to work. In 1993, they paid for Doretta to attend a special residential retreat in Georgia, along with others, to have psychic ability. She learned more about her gifts. Eventually, they had come close to a divorce. Ron did admit to Doretta that he did at one period of time, he had an affair on her. And yet they still found time to be together, that they found space to stay with each other. She's so that's kind of like, after a while, after all this got released and everything, they said that it kind of released everything that was going on in the house. And they said around the house, then after all this came to a head, and they figured out a lot of this trauma probably was psychokinesis by all this trauma that was around her. And that's why the old guy in the house kept on focusing on her. It was probably, the old guy was probably the remnants of the guy that was beating her with the belt. After this all came about and she was able to openly embrace all this trauma, they said that weeds, plants and flowers started flourishing around the house. The grass started getting green. Things started thriving, and things got a lot better for them. So just incredible story, that kind of, like, I'm sure that there's more on it. I mean, there's still more on here. For I don't even want to keep on going down on it. I guess other people have lived in the house with nothing going on. They no problems, and so yeah, it was just like, just things would start going strong, and then there'd be that little bit of moment of peace, and then things would go strong, and then a little bit of peace, and then they'd go away just to come back. They come back, and things would be amplified. So it was really a roller coaster, and it was a hard thing. I mean, these kids and the poor little, like Ashley, and what Stephen probably had to go through, and I mean, knowing that he actually even hurt his mom, and he didn't even know that he did it, and just this up and down. Like that family went through a lot. Now, the book is out. I wanted to purchase the book. I wanted to see if I could actually find the book to read in depth myself. But they have it on Amazon. I think it's like $59. Like, and they're like, yeah, it's real expensive. And I went on Walmart and that, I couldn't find the book. It's called People in the Attic, the Doretta Johnson Haunting. And I am there like, I would love to be able to read that book. But there's another case that I'm researching on. I already got some info on it. It's about another family that was going through activity in their house in Birmingham, England. So it's kind of a story that's real interesting, and some twists and turns on that when you find out I'll be covering that either. I might cover it on Saturday and maybe a story, or wait until next Tuesday on the other side and cover it then. But I did. The library might have it. I never thought of that. Our library is just like a walk up the street from us. Um, I might go up there and see if they have it. Maybe even have Eric go up, because Eric's been in that library a couple times. See if they do have it and read it. It's an interesting story. Like, that's where all this information here, apparently that's where it came from, was from the book itself. So anybody have any questions? Like, I found it interesting. I think that's, I don't want to knock anybody's religion. I think that's why, though, I sway away from religion to an extent, because when you're needing help and you have a archbishop in particular calling up and talking to you, and they're kind of like almost belittling you because you're not married and you have children out of wedlock, and you don't attend the church and you don't do this and that. Like, help these poor people out and worry about that stuff later. Like, there's a cry for help. You would think you're a religious person. You're supposed to be helping people. Don't judge them, then help them, and then get things accomplished after that. Like, that was just so rude, and I think uncalled for. And all these people wanted was a little help. It would have been bad enough if it was just a husband and wife, but there's children involved there too. And don't take it out on the whole family, including the children, just because you have an issue because people don't fit in your religious clique. I don't think that's right, but that's just me. And I do apologize if I offend anybody in any way. That's not my goal. That's just how I feel. I think that was really, really wrong of them to do that. So, I mean, heck, it was Lorraine Warren that called him up in the first place, said, hey, these people really, really need help. Can you go and help them out? And, oh, yeah. But then he kind of got rude to her on the phone. So, let's see. Pretty typical roller coaster, things change. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much going on. And I know if that was me, I probably would have said some nasty things back to them. Whether they were religious or not. Wow. See, Gabriella's looking at one thing on here. Is that Amazon?
Yeah.
$727.53, which means the book that I wrote years ago, I think it was published in 2010, I think is when it was published. When it came out, I was very disappointed because the book is only like that thin, and I had it. It was supposed to be like 250 pages, and it came out as a 90-page book. And they cut a ton of stuff out that I had put in it. And I didn't, I was just so excited to have my book published. I didn't pursue it. But then a few years down the line, after my book was published, we found out that the publishing company were crooks. And they did that to a lot of people. So there was a class action lawsuit against them. And they pulled the book off. They stopped all printing of it. And I see now, if you try to get it, which I don't really encourage anybody even to try to get it if they can, because they cut a lot of my book out. I'm very disappointed. There's a lot of typos in there and a lot of shit that was not in there when I sent them the manuscript. Some of them was like, I think one was like $106, and that was a used copy. And I don't even know how many copies are out there circulating a lot, but yeah, I put a lot of time and work into that book, and for them to disappoint it like that. Now, they didn't do that. I had my children's book out, and they didn't seem to do it to the children's book, but they did do it to the romance book. So, but crazy.
I don't want to read the book now.
Yeah, Lorraine really was involved with the Catholic Church. I think that's why I get mad when people they get mad at psychics and mediums or anybody even paranormal, but they don't understand that the majority of people that are psychics or into the paranormal are usually very religious people. They really usually follow one religion completely, like usually Catholic or whatever, but they're not non-religious people, and they aren't satanic worshipers and demon following people and all that. They usually are. They usually carry a Bible around. They usually have rosary beads. They usually have holy water. Like they're religious people, and paranormal people get a bad rap because people think that they're dabbling in with demons. So, um, but Lorraine, yeah, she always wanted to help people. The problem with that is when she brought the help and everything and that in, it always went a bit further, and there was always that book or film that came into play, and it turned into dollar signs, which then the fakery and the pretending stuff. And me and Eric was just talking about we hate when somebody's watching a movie and it says based on a true story. Now the magical ward is based. So these people are going on and watching this movie, and they're expecting everything to be right spot on. And oh, that was like that never happened. Oh, well, no, it didn't. The movie itself was based on a true story, but the events and stuff in that in there would have been switched. And usually they say that on like a disclaimer. The story may be switched, the name may be switched, and it's a movie. They're gonna make up shit.
I found one on eBay for $15.
Oh,
and it's the hardcover.
I might have to try to see if I can get that. She said she found one on eBay. This item is out of stock.
Oh, damn it.
Yep, this item is out of stock because she found one for $15.95 on eBay, but it says this item's out of stock. So I like to see a lot of the early work of the Warrens too. Actually, I might delve into that on one of the shows too, because when they started out, they had really good intentions. And from what I was told, they were really good people. But somewhere along the line, I heard that, I hate saying it, I mean, because if you watch like The Conjuring and the movies and everything, they're portrayed as such a great, nice, loving couple and super nice people. But from what I was reading and some of the research that I did, Ed was not exactly this squeaky clean guy that everybody thought he was. That he had some skeletons in his closet that not a lot of people know. And but maybe we can delve into that on a show here sometime. But we're at an hour and 37. I knew that one would be long. I honestly thought I was going to end up having to do a part 2. Gabriella has a big topic that she's going to be covering on Thursday on Real Talk. So,
well, I think there's 2 of them, but the one is very short.
Okay, so she said thinks there'll be 2. She said one might be really short, might be like that devil stomping ground. Just watch out for those circles, and you know, if you can get a picture and you see that devil there strutting his stuff around the circle, and like he's doing Catwalk, hurry up and snap that picture, because we want to share that, because we think we figured out, especially if you're heading down North Carolina to the Devil's Circle down there. But I appreciate all of you guys once again showing up. My same peeps are showing up. I love you. Once again, let's wish Angelina the best. And we're going to say with that, we'll catch you next time on the other side. So we will see you guys. Thanks for joining, everyone. We love you. Hope you enjoyed the show.